Well, I guess we should begin because it's 7:04. So welcome everyone. This is a new thing that we're doing. I'm so glad that you're here. Most of you know me, but my name is Alejandro Hernandez Valdez, and I'm the artistic director of the New Orchestra of Washington. And I just wanted to tell you about kNOWit, which is this new initiative that we just started. It's going to be our first one. Each kNOWit event is paired with a Now concert, and we're trying to give our audience a better understanding of our, how music in our atmosphere, in our world works. And we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, to the artists. Want to make sure that you feel involved. We also want to make sure that our artists have an opportunity to connect with you, and we want to promote, keep on promoting music and of course, the talent of all the people that we work with. So we have a very special panel this evening. From the Olus Quartet, we have Rachel Shapiro, Caitlin Lynch, Alan Richardson. From Sandbox Percussion, we have Johnny Allen, Terry Sweeney, and then we have the wonderful composer Viet Kwong. Please feel free to type your questions on the chat, and I'll be reading them to our panelists to make sure that we have a nice discussion. And I think we can go ahead and start right away. First of all, I'd like to explain why we chose the title for this concert in particular. Lift Every Voice. As many of you will know, Lift Every Voice is perhaps the unofficial anthem of the Black Church. It's a beautiful, beautiful hymn, and it has extremely appropriate words for the time. And I thought that would be just a good title to kind of put us in the right frame for these conversations. As many of you know, it's not a secret. Traditionally, composition has been dominated by white men, by mostly dead white men, and mostly European for many many years. Obviously, that changed when the United States became a superpower of music at some point. But it's still, even with all the changes that we've made socially, um, things haven't changed as much as they should in the classical field, and we're trying to change that. We're trying to make sure that we start a conversation that has a very, very important impact in what we're doing, the way we're thinking about music, the way we choose music, and that's why we need to talk about this. So let me start with that question. How do we diversify our field? What are we trying to do to make things different moving forward? I know this is probably especially challenging for a string quartet because again the repertoire is so vastly dominated by classical composers that are mostly white male. For the percussion ensemble, it'll probably be different. But why don't you guys talk about it? Why don't we start with you, Rachel? What would you like to say about that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Alejandro. And thank you guys for putting together this great opportunity to chat. It's so nice to see lots of familiar faces and names here. But anyway, to your question, yeah, I think kind of thinking back really and how the string quartet began and kind of like the conservatory culture that we grew up in, there's so much just put on, like honing your craft. And there's just like this very narrow column of musical names, like composers that of course we're going to go through, especially as string quartet players, like Haydn being at the top, and all of the different old dead white male composers that you go through as you kind of become this musician that we all want to be. And I think where we as chamber musicians and just as artists right now are really finding that there's a lot more responsibility and a lot of ground to be gained and digging a little deeper and not just taking for granted that there's this specific hierarchy of composers, and if you check off all those boxes then like you're good to go. But there's actually a lot more, it takes a little bit more work to find some of these composers just because they haven't had their chance in the spotlight, and there's just a little bit more unearthing that needs to be done. But I think that's one of the most exciting things, particularly about playing this small ensemble music, is that we get to have a lot of say in the rep that we program, and it's really been challenging and exciting and inspiring to find new music that we're really excited to bring to light with composers that haven't had as much recognition as they should.
Yeah, great. Caitlin, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, beautifully said, Rach. And I can only elaborate that we've learned a lot and done a lot of research through organizations who have been doing phenomenal work in this regard for a long time. And there's so many incredible resources out there for us to learn from and for us to find new music from. And actually, the way that we stumbled upon the Price Quartet that you will see in 2 weeks' time is through a resource from Castle of Our Skins. It's this incredible organization in Boston, and they have wonderful resources and playlists for works by underrepresented composers. And Sphinx organization has amazing resources too, as this Chicago-based group called D, like the letter D, Composed, has amazing playlists by Black composers. It's really been a powerful experience and an important one for us to dig deeper to make that effort, because there's so many incredible composers and artists out there that just haven't been given their fair opportunity to be played.
Absolutely. Alan, what do you say about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with everything Caitlin and Rachel said. Yeah, and I'm sure the Sandbox guys will chime in on this, but I think it's kind of a unique challenge actually for such a traditional ensemble as the string quartet. As Rachel mentioned, we kind of grew up like revering these masterpieces by these old dead European white men and they're amazing works of music that deserve to be revered. There's also a risk, and I think historically it has been the case, that reverence can kind of limit the exposure to new works in general, and particularly new works by underrepresented communities. So it's kind of a constant struggle, I think, for these groups from sort of very hallowed traditions like the string quartet, but it's one that I think we're very excited about, sort of reassessing our relationship with how we pick composers and whose voices we're kind of amplifying through our performance.
And I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because we have two different worlds here. The world of string quartet is so different from the percussion world, right? It's a much newer, cleaner canvas. So Terry, what do you say about this?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, we don't have 200 years of repertoire. One of the things that we have to do as a percussion quartet is spend a lot of time commissioning composers, and we have to think really critically about who those composers are. And I think something we're always looking to do is to look really closely at who that group of people is. It's so interesting because I think if you had asked me 5 or 6 years ago, I was said, we have this disadvantage. We don't have all this amazing repertoire. We can't draw upon the music of, so on and so forth, great composers. But actually now I think one of our advantages is that we're building our programs almost exclusively on music that was written in the last 20 years. And so in some ways we have this advantage of really drawing on the voices of people of our generation, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Johnny, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah. I mean, everything Terry said is spot on, and I think even though we have that advantage of sorts, I feel like it's still just as crucial that we keep it at the forefront of kind of how we're moving forward now, because even for us, when we look back, we realize how important it is to be lifting every voice now, because it's even us. It's not something we've done a good enough job of over our last 5 years, and we've kind of looked back over all those programs and tallied up the minutes and seen like, okay, like I think I probably knew it was mostly white men, but when I went through every piece on every program and kind of made the charts, it really hit home that this is something we should be doing. It should be reflecting our community more than it is, and I think it's better for everybody when it does. It's not just about checking boxes. It's about, I think that is a better concert program, and it's a more fulfilling concert experience for people when they're experiencing music that maybe they can connect to more in a way. So I really see it as just kind of the best option all around.
I agree. So we are very privileged that we have a living, not white composer with us, Viet Quang, fantastic composer that I've had the privilege to conduct his music. Viet, what do you say about this whole movement that we're going through?
Yeah, well, I mean, I echo everything everyone said. I don't play in an ensemble, so I don't really have, I don't program music unless I'm playing it by myself, which you can do. But I think that composers, at least I feel like I'm starting to. People start asking me like, oh, who are composers? Like for their own programming and stuff, and so we kind of have an obligation when we have that. I don't know what the right word is, but when people ask you for advice on what to program to support your friends who write amazing music who are underrepresented. And also I think this is my first year teaching actually at a university, and I think we as teachers have a moral obligation to make every student feel welcome in our community. And one way to do that is to, when we teach, to use music that by composers who look like them, who sound like them, people that they can see themselves in. Because when I was in music school, like 10, 15 years ago, I think like basically in every single one of my theory classes, it was all music by white people. And it's like you have to think about what message that sends to the students. And so when I teach now, it's like something I think of every time I find musical examples of things, is to have music that's from a variety of not just not just in classical music, but also in other genres as well. Because I think it's an important thing as well, not to think when we think of certain composers who are underrepresented, try to teach music that isn't just music that's written in the way that like European people have written music. It's also like by representing other genres, it's kind of more inclusive all around.
Yeah, well said. I think the the ultimate goal of programming should be storytelling, and in an inclusive way. I think that's very important. I think by diversifying, we're making music more accessible, because that way people relate to what they're hearing and seeing, and they connect, which is something that we've always complained for so many now centuries in the classical world, that, or maybe not centuries, but decades, many decades. Well, our audiences are shrinking, and all we see is white people and older people. Well, it's because of the music that we're playing, right? We're not reflecting our community in our music, and that, I think, that has been a problem. Now, in order to do it right, you need to be very imaginative and very creative, because unfortunately, institutionalized discrimination has been so present that it makes it really hard for us to find diverse music. If you go to publishers, the greatest publishers in the world, if you go to Ben and Ryder or Breitkopf or all those wonderful publishers, if you look at their list of compositions, it's again mostly white and European composers, and then you have these small kind of boutique publishers working on composers that are much more diverse. So you have to really go through the rabbit hole to find music that, again, that will reflect your community. What are the challenges that you're facing in finding diverse repertoire? Let me start with you, Rachel, again.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think the challenges are just in I think the time that you have to put, and like the resources, as you were mentioning, Alejandro, that you have to like be able to kind of gather into the search. And I think for us as a quartet, kind of having an idea of like where we're hoping to go, and like what kind of music, or like if there's specific composers that we're digging and trying to find more about, then that like really guides our search in that way. I think for us, kind of with programming, a lot of times our audience still wants like very traditional pieces. And I think, as I think Alan mentioned before, there's, of course, we still love all of the powerhouses, the titans of string quartet literature, and we are so happy to perform those. But a lot of times that some of our chamber music audiences just want to hear like Schubert and Beethoven and all of those composers. And so for us, finding a good balance where we are able to kind of introduce these new voices or underrepresented voices into a program that will still get taken up by a presenter that maybe has an audience that isn't quite ready for some of the more even for a composer maybe that they just aren't familiar with. That's kind of a struggle that we sometimes are up against, but like one very much worth fighting.
Yeah, I agree. So I think as artists, we have a responsibility towards the community to achieve relevancy by supporting ideas and causes that, you know, have the betterment of the society at its core. So what is our responsibility towards the community? Let me start with you, Johnny, on this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite questions to think about, because I mean, it's I almost wish we could get some like audience feedback on this, like, because sometimes I feel like I'm so entrenched in this world of like, well, you know, it feels like I make music as my living, so obviously I think it's important, so that's enough answer for that. But but I see music and the arts as sort of a creative fuel for the people around it. And that I mean, I think creativity is as crucial a resource as anything in the world. And I I know personally, when I go see a beautiful concert, I feel recharged the way I feel after a great meal, or the way I feel after a great night of sleep, or something like that. But it's like, it's not rest and it's not energy. Creative fuel is kind of the best way I can think of it. And I think that's kind of the artist's responsibility in a lot of ways, is providing that, so that everyone else can move forward and be creative in their own ways in their lives to kind of help society progress and get better.
I mean, this pandemic has like kind of put things into perspective, you know, just like just in a personal way, you know, you start to understand that maybe exercise is more important than an extra hour of practicing, right? You know, the kind of thing. It really brought things into focus, and I think it's the same with just the classical music business in general. And we have to prioritize differently, I think, to you know to remain relevant. So Caitlin, what is the point of arts in society? What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right that the pandemic has really put things, brought things into light for me on this question, because of course, as Johnny said, you know, we're musicians, we really believe in this art and the good that it can do for society and for everyone in it. But I feel like there was this moment for me towards the beginning of the pandemic. The quartet provided some recordings of ours to be played by the head of a nursing unit in the COVID unit. And she would play the recordings at the start of their shift as a way, in her words, to bring our hearts back down to our chests. And she asked for the music. She felt like there was so much that was overwhelming that they were encountering. And she asked for it as a way to center them and to, you know, that sentence, bring our hearts back into our chests, has really stuck with me. And I feel like, you know, we went, gosh, guys, how many months did we go after the start of the pandemic before we got to play with each other again? So
It's like
definitely
3 or 4
months.
Yeah,
I mean, definitely the longest
crazy.
time the quartet has ever spent apart since the quartet was formed. And I felt like there was this energy that it gave when we finally got to play with one another. And I feel like it's this gift of allowing people a place to feel safe, to feel whatever the music makes them feel, or whatever they need to feel in that moment. And it's beauty, it's solace, it's distraction, it's peace, it's whatever it needs to be for an individual in that moment. But that sentence for me just answers the question, like something to bring our hearts to our chests.
Absolutely, that's beautiful. And as we were saying before, our percussion quartet makes a living mostly by performing contemporary composers. So they have a completely different set of tools, I guess, to work with. But Pam Richardson is asking, if a presenter want to accept a different program, how do musicians, excuse me, make a living? Terry, do you have an answer to that?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to how musicians can make a living generally, but when we're talking,
we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah, well said.
But I think that whenever we're working with presenters, we're you know, a lot of times we're heavily making a case for the music that we really believe in, and if we're going to put it up on stage, I think that means we feel really strongly about that music. And I think almost always that means we can have a conversation with the presenter. I can't think of a situation where someone said like, no, we want less diverse programming. Oftentimes we have presenters now like maybe pushing us in the right direction in terms of diversity or inclusion. So I actually think that for the most part, we've found that presenters have been kind of, you know, aligned actually with us in terms of what the goals are. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, I was wondering if to just piggyback on that. I like thinking of it as because it's easy to think about how you're maybe stretching a traditional audience by playing something that they haven't heard before. But I like kind of telling presenters, well, what if this thing that maybe your traditional audience hasn't heard before will bring in someone else who's never heard of Bach, and that person is brought in by this other thing and now has learned that, oh my gosh, I actually am really into classical music as well. And like, it's this way of kind of expanding everyone's world and bringing audiences together in a way that I think, yeah, it works both ways in that sense. And oftentimes I think presenters can get into that idea. They're like, oh, actually, maybe we'll grow our audience this way in a sense.
If I can chime in for a second on that too, Johnny, that was very well said. And I think that's so, I think that's, yeah, really true, that as we kind of, yeah, present new kinds of music and just new music to people, yeah, we're just expanding the audience. I wanted to say, I think that this problem has been an issue for our quartet for a long time. And I think it's, one really amazing thing about this year is that I think that's going to change, honestly. I think that just like we're having this conversation right now, I think the board of every chamber music society that's ever presented us is having this conversation right now. And I think that more and more presenters are going to be demanding diversity on their programs rather than maybe shying away from it. And I think that's an amazing thing that's happened from this moment of kind of, mass visibility of this systemic problem.
I think we're in a watershed problem. I mean, not period, rather, no problem. Watershed moment. I always relate it to what happened after World War One and the 1918, I think, pandemic. It's similar, right? And all the new music that came out of that, with the Schoenberg people and Stravinsky and all those wonderful composers. And I think it was born out of great trauma, and the trauma made it happen. And I think we're in a similar parallel situation right now. As a composer, as a contemporary composer, what do you have to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I think like when I write music, I think there are a lot of different composers have different kind of goals with their music. Some just write it for themselves. They want to express what they want to say, and that's it. When I write music, it's kind of like I write it for myself because I think every composer does on some level, because you want to be proud of what you're writing. You want to express something that you can't really put into words. But I also kind of think of it like when I'm writing for an audience or a community, I want to kind of make them like something that they didn't think they'd like. It's like I think of writing music for a bunch of me's in the audience, but not me as my current self, me as the 13-year-old kid who really loved music but didn't know anything about it, but kind of had all of the kind of potential to love a lot of different types of music. And so that's like kind of how I approach when I think about the composer's role in the community, is to kind of inspire people in that way.
Yeah, that's great. And let's see. Let me ask one of our audience's questions here. So Will is asking, how do the artists define classical music, and how does that affect the way they diversify their programs? First of all, I want to say that I have such a hard time with the term classical. I've always had a hard time with that. I think probably many of you have also. I just cannot figure out a better label for what we do. That's the problem. And if you go into that, you run into all kinds of other problems, right? If you name it, I don't know, through composed music or whatever, whatever fancy name you want to come up with, it's really hard. But anyway, to the question, let's see. Alan, you wanna
Yeah,
take the
absolutely.
question?
And Alejandro, that's such a great point. It's like, what do we call it? I think sometimes there was a period, and I definitely fell in this, where people were saying art music a lot, and that is such a terrible dig at all music that's not classical music. Is that not art? Through composed music is a great idea. It's a mouthful.
It's very academic.
Yeah, but that's probably the best way to kind of accurately describe what we're doing. I think it is I think it's an interesting point, and Viet was saying earlier about kind of introducing composition students to different kinds of music as well, kind of within the same umbrella. And I think that's a really important thing for groups and individuals who are maybe slightly more able to do that organically than a string quartet, where most of our repertoire does fall into this kind of traditional through composed music genre. But I think that there is the thing that really, other than, as you say, Alejandro, it being through composed, I think the thing that really sets our experience aside is the way that we frame it, the way we frame our music in a concert hall, where our audience is kind of expected to sit and just experience the music kind of for its own sake. I think that's the thing that sets sort of classical music apart from other genres, is the trappings that we put on it. And I think as we're kind of that's changing a lot also, sort of how we present classical music is changing. And I think that opens up a lot of potential for genre mixing. I'd also say so many composers of classical music are also sort of incorporating different styles and different genres into the music, that the lines are just getting more and more blurred, honestly, in all ways. And I think the more we can embrace that, to open up space for new voices and also to bring in new audiences, I think it's just everyone wins.
I totally agree. I think we need to contextualize pieces and performances to make music accessible. You know, there's a perfect example, and you've probably seen it. There's this opera by Rameau, Les Sons de Galon, and it's very problematic because it's about slavery most of the time. And there's a famous aria, it's a duet, as a matter of fact, with chorus, that is the most famous moment in the opera, that is often represented as just people in chains marching to a march, right, to march music. And there's this video on YouTube, I cannot remember the company, unfortunately, where that same aria is presented in a completely different way. And instead of the traditional slaves, again, on chains, you have these street dancers. And it's just, you know, everybody's amazed by the end. I mean, you can hear the people, the bravi, you know, from the audience. It's really, it makes your skin, you know, gotta say, have goosebumps, as I say in the States. So it's really, I think contextualization is super important, and it can make a big difference, even on something as offensive as that moment in that opera can be, you know, even though it's just great music. Anyway, I think we should go to some videos, because we have so many wonderful musical examples I want to share with you tonight. So let's see. Let me just go to my notes here. We have a video with Sandbox, and let's see. Johnny, would you like to introduce this clip?
Yes. Yeah, I guess we were chatting at the beginning about, you know, the new shapes that our art form has taken in pandemic life, and so this video that we wanted to share was one from kind of that early. It was like a month or two into the pandemic, when you had kind of just gotten used to this new way of life, and maybe even started like feeling relaxed a little bit rather than on edge the whole time. You're like, okay, I can just stay inside all day long, even though it's beautiful outside. We had not been rehearsing together for about 2 months, maybe. Obviously, we were still on the phone every day, the four of us in Sandbox, but we wanted some way of making music together. But we couldn't really see each other. We didn't have instruments really in our apartment, certainly not marimbas and vibraphones or anything. And any piece with a really defined instrumentation we probably couldn't do. But we turned to this old piece, one of the first pieces we ever learned as a group, which felt kind of appropriate, a piece called Extremes by Jason Truding, which has an open instrumentation. So you can play it on any kind of low sound and any high sound and any pitched sound. And we could find those around our apartment many times over. So we all had a great time putting this together. We just recorded it on our cell phones, the cameras and the audio. And then we put it all together and mixed it on our own. And Victor Kachese, one of the members of the group, made the video, which is very fun. And we tried to fill it with the little, I don't know, personalities of our quarantine life. So if you look at any given tile at any moment, you'll see little references to what our lives were like in that moment. And I think we're all really proud of this video, in that we took a situation that was in and of itself very limiting and kind of used those limitations to try and make something that really couldn't have happened otherwise, and almost kind of flip the situation on its head. So I think this is just an excerpt from our quarantine edition of Extremes.
That's an amazing clip. Even the cat was chewing on beat. Ian's cat. Really amazing. Thank you, guys. And now we have another clip. This is a clip by Olus. And let's see, Caitlin, would you like to introduce this one?
Sure. That was amazing, by the way, guys. Way to go. That was awesome. The recording you're about to hear is very different. This is from a project that we began near the beginning of the pandemic called Bach for All. In the first week of April, when the pandemic was absolutely devastating in New York City, we had been scheduled to play at a hospital in Manhattan. And obviously this performance couldn't happen. And it was really a difficult moment because I feel like, as we talked about in our previous conversation about, the role of art in society, is we're so often there when there are difficult moments of difficulty, and we couldn't be there and we couldn't play in the hospital. And so in lieu of that, we did the only thing we could do at the moment, which was to share a video with the hospital of us. Somebody had snatched a video on their cell phone of us playing a Bach chorale as part of our warm-up for a concert we played in Vermont the previous fall. And chorales had been a really important part of our existence together since the very beginning. Our teachers gave us chorales to basically learn how to hone our craft together as a quartet. And ever since, we've played them as warm-ups for rehearsals, as warm-ups for concerts. They're incredible gems of music, and also they happen to be about a minute long. And so we the response we got from the hospital was unexpectedly overwhelming. And we thought, well, maybe this is our opportunity to try to do something good right now, to provide a minute each week to our listeners of peace and beauty, and to try to give a new routine that was a positive one at a time when everyone's routines were completely upended. And so since then, we've sent a different Bach chorale that we are playing each Monday morning to our newsletter list. And this is the one you're about to hear was recorded in Detroit. This was the first time we got together after the beginning of the pandemic. We all drove for like I don't know. I think I drove for 18 hours. It was ridiculous. I accidentally went to Canada. It was a whole mess. Anyway, we were exhausted. We all agreed not to stay in any hotels on the way there so we could make it there safely. And we all drove and it was crazy. But what you're about to hear is the result of, of that crazy adventure.
That was beautiful. Bach is a dead white composer we should always continue to play. It's just medicine for the soul, for sure. And Viet, you have a clip that you want to show us as well. I love your music. It's so imaginative and so fresh, and you know, it just sounds like something completely new every time I hear your music. So, what do you have for us?
Thank you. Yeah, speaking of medicine for the soul, I think laughter, smiling is definitely one. So I'm going to share a piece that I wrote before the pandemic, but it's a piece that is kind of meant to be funny and whimsical. It's a double oboe concerto called Extraordinarily Fancy, where one of the oboists wants to sound ordinarily fancy and the other oboist wants to sound extra fancy. So they play what are called multiphonics, where the second oboist plays multiphonics, which are technically incorrect fingerings that produce a very distorted sound, kind of like if you were to plug an oboe into like a guitar distortion pedal. So it's kind of like a back and forth argument. And I was happy at the premiere, like people actually laughed because nothing like a joke falling flat, right? Especially when it's music. So this is like the part of the piece where they're like really going like bickering back and forth, and it's very Baroque inspired. So there's harpsichord and lots of chord progressions you would find in Bach or Vivaldi.
That's really awesome. That's one of the pieces on my bucket list for the New Orchestra of Washington. So hopefully we'll get to do it sometime soon.
I love that.
So the pandemic has obviously changed everything we do. Like I am mostly a pianist now, not so much of a conductor. I play a lot of things and record myself and send them to all the places that I'm supposed to send them to. How has the pandemic changed your approach to music? Let me start with you, Alan, this time.
Yeah, it's been huge. I think that, yeah, it's been almost a full year since we've had any kind of regular public performing at this point, which is just unbelievable. I mean, it's really, yeah, I think obviously no one saw this coming at the beginning of the lockdown, and it's just kind of surreal that it's gone on this long and that we've gone without performing for this long. But as Caitlin mentioned earlier, the few opportunities that our quartet has had to actually get together and record some music together, it's just been such an amazing kind of balm for the soul. And you know, it's made me appreciate the opportunity to play for anyone so much more than I think we used to take it for granted in a lot of ways. And you know, the video that we saw a few moments ago of us playing the Bach chorale, there was one other person other than the four of us in the room pressing start on the cameras, and it was like, we have an audience. We're making music for someone. And so I think that, you know, there is actually a plus side to that, which is I think we really do feel a deep appreciation for the opportunities to actually share music live with people in a way that I think it was easy for it to become something that, you know, it's just life. This is what we do. And when it's not what we do, it is, I think we all have come to realize how sweet that is. So yeah, really enjoying and the opportunities to perform for people and getting creative when we can't, which is most of the time. We've made some virtual, probably 70% of our chorales have been recorded remotely, actually, where we're all for recording our parts individually and kind of layering them, which is satisfying in its own way. And, you know, we've all done a ton of projects and gotten very, really stepped up our tech savvy. I think that's like a new requirement for being in the arts, is you have to know how to like do a little bit of recording and a little bit of editing. So it's been a time of major change for all of us, but I think, you know, it's been exciting to see how everyone is handling this situation so creatively.
Hey, Johnny, what has been the experience for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, the learning of new skills is something that resonates so much, and skills that I'm glad to know. I think the old skills of being in a room with people and playing a concert, I can't wait to get back to those. But we have learned some things that I think we'll actually kind of keep doing as well. Like we've learned how to live stream concerts from our studio, which means we don't have to move any gear because it's all there already. So that was a big perk, but it also comes with the responsibility of, okay, what are all the camera angles going to be, and where are the mics going to go, and who's going to move them between pieces, and what should the lighting be, you know, yada yada yada. It's like, I think I'd rather move gear sometimes. But that has
Careful.
also it's been an incredible way of reaching audiences that we never could have. Like, I know people are tuning in from Russia and from Asia and you know, all over, that we probably wouldn't have gotten to play for those people otherwise. So I think that's something that maybe we won't do every month like we've been doing, but I think we'll do every couple months or every few months. Try to keep that up even when things are I don't even know if back to normal is the word for it anymore. Whatever the after times are, there's that, and yeah, we've also pivoted to recording. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Terry. I've been hogging the mic.
No, it's great. I mean, I'll just jump in quickly, and I'll say that implicit in what Johnny is saying is that Sandbox has been super, super lucky. The four of us live in the same city. We are childless, and so our responsibilities as human beings are perhaps less than a lot of other people around us. And so, the four of us have made like a pod of the four of us and our significant others. And so we've actually been able to rehearse, and with the exception of one actual concert that happened outdoors in upstate New York for real people in person, we, like Johnny said, we've been doing a lot of live streaming and a lot of recording. And like that's kind of the percussionist's way. Like, okay, we have to learn a new thing. Okay, great. Let's figure out how to do that as best as we can. Like, I don't know, a couple of months ago, right before the pandemic, Viet wrote us a piece for a giant wooden box that we rubbed sandpaper on. And turns out it's really hard to rhythmically rub sandpaper because it's just a weird motion. None of us have ever done it before. And so we all had to learn in the time that we had the piece, we had to learn how do we become awesome at this skill. And I think that the pandemic has really let us kind of flourish. Like, okay, we have to live stream from our studio, or we have to record, but we can't let anyone else come into the recording session except the four of us. So we have to produce it, we have to edit it, we have to mix it, we have to do everything ourselves. So we're all just going to learn how to do that as best as we can. And so I think it's been a series of failures, but we're getting better, I think, little by little at all these new fun things.
Well, you'll see in 20 years, there'll be a doctorate in sandpaper rubbing performance or something like that.
Right.
And the purpose of this conversation, of course, is all these important topics, but also to warm you up for our concert coming up. And that is going to be on Saturday, February the 27th at 7 p.m. We're going to present three pieces. These three pieces are with these wonderful collaborators that we've worked with in the past several times. And I'm so privileged again to have made music with them and perform their music in Viet's case. So let's see, let me start with the Florence Price piece, the string quartet you're going to be performing. Rachel, what can you tell us about that piece?
Oh, it's gorgeous, and something that's new to us. This is a recently added piece to our repertoire, and it gives us the feeling of that we've had this in our fingers for years. But we were drawn to this piece because Florence Price is an incredible composer. She's a Black female composer who was living in the early 20th century, and her story it's really amazing. I mean, she just in order to find the time to be able to create the music that she did, she had to overcome so many hurdles that other people, white men, wouldn't have had to overcome in that position. And it's just recently been a lot of her music has just recently been uncovered. I was reading this article about how there's a house on the outskirts of Chicago where a whole bunch of her manuscripts were found just before it was demolished, and it's just incredible. I mean, those pieces were so close to never really entering the canon, say if those manuscripts hadn't been found. So we feel very lucky to be playing this quartet in G major. It has, you can definitely hear the academic portion of her music, which is in the Western canon, but then she brings a lot of Black American dances into her writing as well. There's a juba rhythm and other very cool influences. So it's gorgeous two-movement work, and we hope you all enjoy it.
That's amazing. And how about that piece, Seven Pillars? It's a big project, right? Big recording project. Johnny, what can you tell us about that project?
Yeah. And so I think people will be hearing one of the movements on the 27th, Pillar 4 specifically, which Andy wrote that 6 years ago. It was supposed to be one piece, standalone. But as he was writing it, he realized this is actually the middle movement of a 75-minute piece. Sorry, that's just what it is. And so our job over the last 6 years has been trying to help him realize the other 65 minutes of music. around that center movement. And that's a piece, that whole work, Seven Pillars, was supposed to happen back in April, but that is actually the recording project Terry was talking about. We've pivoted from focusing on playing it live, because who knows when we'll get to do that. What we can control is when we're going to release the album. So we've been recording that, and are planning actually kind of a video release of that later in the spring. But yeah, you'll get to see Pillar 4. And if you pay close attention, you'll find things in there that will be distributed throughout the whole rest of the work, once that is all available to everyone later this spring.
Wonderful. And Andy Akiho is a Japanese American composer, brilliant. Actually, I got to learn about Sandbox through his music, and then I got to know Ian, and then work with you guys. So yeah, it's incredible music. So please tune in for that. And yet we have a piece also by you, Renewal, which we performed in the Orchestra of Washington. And when was it? Last maybe a couple of years ago. It's been last year, maybe. Can't remember exactly, but it was a wonderful experience. And what can you tell us about that piece?
Yeah, so this is a piece that I wrote for Sandbox. It's a percussion quartet concerto, and this is the chamber orchestra version, which is the original version that, well, the whole piece is inspired by renewable energy. So it's 3 movements. The first movement is the Hydropower Movement, and they toast, quite literally, they toast tuned wine glasses. And they kind of sound like handbells, and it's kind of meant to be a celebration of renewable energy, because we toast glasses when we celebrate something usually. Second movement is about wind power. So you'll see they literally become a wind turbine, and the movement is inspired by 90s drum and bass music, which is a genre of dance music. And they're kind of in a wind turbine formation where they share a snare drum in the middle, and they each have their own hi-hat and kick drums. So it's kind of like a octopus drum set formation, where they play an impossible drum set beat that is made possible by splitting it between the 4 of them. And then the last movement is a solar panel movement, where they play a lot of metallic percussion, and the whole movement's kind of like this rising, the sunrise, essentially. And Sandbox is amazing, so
yeah, we got to perform it.
They're like pieces, like everything that they are really amazing at doing. So check it out.
Yes, absolutely. And this is a piece that all of us, I think, in this panel got to perform together, right? I think so. Yes. And it's a piece that really, when we're talking about contextualizing, that brings everything together. A real concerned environment, the choreography of it, which is brilliant, and just brilliant music. So it just puts it all in one place. So don't miss it. Let's see, how can we continue to follow your wonderful groups? Caitlin, what can we find out? No, Rachel, pardon me. I have my notes here. Rachel, what can we find out more about Aeolus?
So if you want to get some of the weekly Bach goodness in our Bach for All project, I think a lot of you are already on our list, so thank you for that. But you can go over to our website, which is just aeolusquartet.com. You can enter your email, and you can get your daily dose of 2 minutes of Bach, and sometimes other music, but always just short little bits. And we are on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And you can also be on the lookout for an album that is being released later this spring. So we're very excited about that.
Wonderful. And Terry, what can we learn more about Sandbox?
Yeah, great. I mean, like Rachel said, all of the social media places, if you Google Sandbox Percussion, I think you'll quickly find us. But I'll just quickly pin a couple of things. If you sign up for our mailing list, you can get a little more info about some of the live streams that Johnny and I were talking about, and hopefully soon hear a little bit of info about that album. We were also talking about the Andy Akiho 7 Pillars that should be in the next few months. We also have a Patreon account, which is where you can support the work we do, and also get some cool behind the scenes stuff, some cool videos and early access to some of those recordings, actually. So check that out. Yeah.
Thanks, Terry. And Viet, where can we have more access to your brilliant music?
Yeah, I have a website of vietquangmusic.com. If you Google my name, it should come up. And I have on my website, I have all the recordings of the pieces I have recordings for, videos, all that good stuff. And you can follow me on social media, but I rarely post. So
Well,
you can
thanks.
follow me anyway. It was, everyone using words for followers, right?
Thank you, Viet. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. It's been really, really fun. Hopefully we will spread the news about this get-togethers, and we'll have more and more people as we do more of this. But this was just so rewarding just to talk about these very important topics and just to support the wonderful work that you're doing. And again, don't forget the concert is on Saturday, February the 27th at 7 p.m. We will see you next time. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.
See everyone later.